The old South is being replaced by the new South, and there is some friction. I think that is natural with any transition that you see, whether it's political, economic, or otherwise. And I think that we're in that moment. That gives me an incredible amount of hope.
That was Black Voters Matter co-founder LaTosha Brown speaking in a new MSNBC documentary entitled Battleground Georgia. It highlights the state's central role in the fight for voting rights across the South. Black Voters Matter co-founder Cliff Albright joins us now.
Cliff, thank you so much for being here. We played some sound from the doc already, and yesterday we talked to Senator Warnock about the changing in the South. Black Voters Matter was founded in that race against Doug. When Doug Jones got elected to the United States Senate all those years ago, it was because of the organizing work, thanks to groups like yours on the ground, going to various spaces and places, literally moving people to the polls, galvanizing their interests. Talk about the just change that you've seen in Georgia specifically and across the South just over the last 10 years.
Yeah, thanks, Salome. Thanks for having me. I mean, you know, the change is, we always talk about the new South, right? You heard LaTosha talking a little bit about it in the video clip. And certainly there's a new energy in the South. And going back to that Alabama race, and as we would travel around the South after 2017, every state that we went to, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, everybody said, how can we do here what y'all just did in Alabama? Well, shucks, we wound up doing it in Georgia, too. And so at the end of the day, there's a lot of energy here, but there's also a lot of concerns, because what we know is there's always a backlash to our progress. And that's exactly what we've seen here. As our voting power has increased, as our mobilization has increased, we've also seen an increase in voter suppression. And that wasn't just something that happened after the 2020 election. It's still going on. Alabama just passed another voter suppression bill. Georgia just passed another voter suppression bill on top of the one that was passed in 2021, which is talked a lot about in the documentary. And so the battle continues, and we need everybody from all voters to media to elected officials all the way up to the White House to recognize that the suppression is not over.
So, Cliff, on that point, I think it's an excellent point. You do have sort of the legislative response to Black empowerment in this generation. And it's a very different type of empowerment than we saw in the 60s. It's a different narrative in different forms. But then you also have, you referenced that backlash within the community itself. And I give you Cardi B, who's very prominent and very well known, saying, well, you know what? I'm not voting in this presidential election. That belies the narrative. It takes the energy out of the story that you're telling about this emerging New South, the power of Black voices and votes pushing back up against the system. But then you have individuals within our community saying, I'm not voting. How do you reconcile that? And what do you say to the Cardi B's out there who are looking at this election and just sort of flaking out because one is old and the other's crazy?
Yeah, you give me Cardi B, I say, well, yeah, and you got Sexy Red, and you got a whole bunch of others to go along with that. At the end of the day, though, they do reflect a sentiment that's in some parts of our community, particularly the sentiment of, I don't know what's been done. I don't know if I'm going to vote. And so it's not something that we can just dismiss, right? It's something that we have to address. You ask me, what do I say? And what we say a lot of times when we see that in the communities, we say, you know what? I hear you. I feel you. I do this work every day. And there are days that I wake up and I'm like, oh, no, I don't know if I'm feeling this, right? And so the first thing we do is to affirm that the frustration our folks are feeling is real, right? It's their lived experience, that it's not just something that's made up. But after we do that, now we're in a dialogue, right? Because we haven't just treated them like they're crazy or they're just lazy. Now we're in a dialogue and we can take the conversation forward to show them what exactly is at stake, to show them what exactly has been done, to show them why it is, how is this voting process connected to what it is that you want in your life, for yourself, your family, for your community. When we can connect those dots, we've seen it. This is a part of our theory of change. We've seen people change their attitudes, but it takes a certain kind of dialogue in order for that to take place. And it takes a voting framework so that they can actually have their passions become power.
Cliff, I've got about 30 seconds left, but what do you say to an organizer in another state who's watching, who says, how do we become the next Georgia?
I'd say a couple of things. One, it takes a lot of work and a lot of conversations with a lot of folks in our communities. The folks that are closest on the ground, they know how to get this done. The second thing I say is don't get frustrated or don't allow other people to let you become victims of your own success. We've got some people here, because of what we've done in Georgia, that say, oh, voter suppression must not be that bad. Look, Senator Warnock won. They ignore the fact that he won against somebody who didn't even live in a state and couldn't complete a sentence. It should not have been that close. And part of the reason it was close was because of voter suppression. The battle is not over, and we need everybody, again, from the streets up to the White House, to recognize that this battle for our voting rights is not over, and we need to prioritize it in this election cycle.
Cliff Albright, a great message, and if I may be so bold, a great blazer. Thank you so much for being here with us. You can watch Battleground Georgia. That is tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on MSNBC. We have got another hour of the weekend straight ahead, including